I'm going to say, at least eventually, their long losing streak ended. However, I think playoffs is starting to look more and more unlikely for our junior hockey team. Anyway, just got back up from after work Friday adult nap, as it's time for another episode of Hi there, it's Bret Hart here, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Hitmen in 6. This will be Season 4, Episode number 10, as we'll take a look on how games 49 to 54 went during the 2021-22 WHL regular season. And did say in the last episode things definitely were starting to look bleak for our junior hockey team as they went on up to an 8-game losing streak at the end of the episode. Well, eventually that losing streak ended. However, I'm thinking for making the playoffs, it's looking less unlikely for our junior hockey team this year. But considering how they matched up against a certain few teams that they played a couple times in this episode, maybe it would be not worth making the playoffs when you look at it that way. But this is just junior hockey, and they can always gain the experience from making the playoffs. So before I get into my notes and recap how the previous 6 games went, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and I have my other social links down in the description below. And of course, I have my second channel in Bret Hart Shorts. So I appreciate like, subscribe both here on my main channel as well as my second channel. So I'll bring in my notes, and I said I have streamlined making my notes and doing my recaps the last few episodes, just because I don't have time to make 4 hours of notes. And this is the first time for the Western Hockey League and the Calgary Hitmen. I'm going to use the CHL app to look at the summaries, as well as, of course, there's timestamps always in the description below if you want to jump to any particular games. So let's get going. So game 49, this goes back on Friday, February the 25th, as the Calgary Hitmen were on the road as they were taking on the Lethbridge Hurricanes. This was a 7 p.m. puck drop at the NMAX Center in Lethbridge. And keep in mind, this is when the Calgary Hitmen were on that 8-game losing streak. Then eventually did that losing streak end in this game? Well, I think they made sure they did that in a big way possible, as the Calgary Hitmen did actually get off to a quick start in this one. It was Shipman who got his 8th of the season for Calgary at the 11:09 minute mark to make it 1-0 for Calgary. So Calgary did strike first in this game. And then one of the players that they recently acquired at the Western Hockey League trade deadline is Steel Queering. He actually had 2 goals in the first period for his 9th and 10th of the season combined at the 13:24 minute mark, as well as the 14:18 minute mark. So Steel Queering had 2 goals in just under a minute to make it 3-0 for Calgary. And actually, that's how things stood. After the first period, the Calgary Hitmen actually up 3-0, so things were looking good early for the Calgary Hitmen. However, going into the second period, the Lethbridge Hurricanes decided they wanted to get on the board, and it was Nash who scored his 14th goal of the season on a power play for the Lethbridge Hurricanes at 3:17 to make it a 3-1 game. And actually, that's how things stood after the second period. There was an early goal, an early penalty. Nothing more else to report in this one, as I'm going to say both teams played evenly when you look at the shots in the first 2 periods. So we had a 3-1 game going into the third period for the Calgary Hitmen. However, the fourth period, I think they definitely, or the third period is meant to say, the Calgary Hitmen definitely were ready to get off of this snide, as they had a big third period as they took over. The 4th goal of the game for Calgary came at the 7-minute mark, as it was Zach Funk who scored his 17th of the season. So that made it 4-1 for Calgary. And then it was Carter Yumyuk who got his second of the season shorthanded. This was at the 11-13 minute mark of the third period. So Calgary now led 5-1. Calgary made 6-1. There's another player that they also acquired at the trade deadline. It was Blake Stevenson, who got his 18th goal of the season at 14-10 of the third period to make it 6-1 for Calgary. And then Calgary had a couple more late power play goals, as there was a couple penalties that the Lethbridge Hurricanes took late. It was Oliver Talk who got his 8th of the season on the power play. This was at 17:52 to make it 7-1. And then Blake Allen also scored on a power play, 6th of the season at 18:30 to make it 8-1. So ultimately, the Calgary Hitmen ended their 8-game losing streak in a big way as they defeated the Lethbridge Hurricanes on the road 8-1. So definitely was a statement to get off the schneid, as I would say, as ultimately the shots on goal for the game was the Calgary Hitmen actually outshot the Lethbridge Hurricanes 35-25 overall. As I said, the 8-1 victory for the Calgary Hitmen. So leading the way for the Calgary Hitmen was Steve Aquarian, who had 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. And then Blake Stevenson had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. And then Grady Schlittman had a goal and 2 assists. Goal and assist. Zach Funk had a goal and assist. And then there were 3 players that had 2 assists. Sean Chagall, Riley Finner-Schultz, and Tyson Galloway. So definitely was a lot to go around for the Calgary Hitmen. As I mentioned, it was Ty Nash who was the only player that scored for the Lethbridge Hurricanes. So then it comes to the goaltending story of this game. It was Ethan Bonaventura who was in net for Calgary, who made 24 saves. Well, for the Lethbridge Hurricanes, it was who started the net. It was Jared Pitlick who got the start in net for Lethbridge. He made 21 saves and 26 shots before he was replaced by Ryan Thompson, who made 6 saves on 9 shots the rest of the way. So that was game 49. As the Calgary Hitmen, they were able to, as I mentioned, ended their 8-game losing streak in a big way with that 8-1 victory. So game 50, this happened on Sunday, February the 27th, as the Calgary Hitmen were back at home. They were hosting the Regina Pats at the Scotiabank Saddledome. This was a 4 p.m. puck drop. More Connor Bedard time, as I keep mentioning the Regina Pats, they have Connor Bedard, who was granted exceptional status a couple years ago when he entered the league as a 15-year-old, is favored to be the first overall pick in the 2023 NHL Interdraft. So that all said, how did things go between the Calgary Hitmen and the Regina Pats at home? Well, first it was the Regina Pats, who actually was on the board first. There was actually only 1 goal in the first period, and it was Dale Feist who got his 5th of the season. This was at the 10:49 minute mark to make it 1-0 for Regina, and that was the only goal in the first period. So Regina took an early 1-0 lead. However, there was definitely some rough stuff. July in the first period, as it was Adam McNutt for Regina and Matthew Sutter at 5:03. No relation to the family Sutter, I should say. They had a major fighting penalty at the 5-minute mark. And then Leighton Feist, who did score the opening goal for the Regina Pats. He also fought with Zach Funk at 13:31, so I guess he was one of the verge of wanting to get a Gordie Howe hat trick. And then in 1945 it was Jacob Brook and Tyson Galloway who got in a scrum as well. So there was only 1 goal, but there was some rough stuff to highlight the first period. So it was still Regina up 1-0 after the first period. Going into the second period, the Calgary Hitmen did strike back, and just like the first period, there was only 1 goal, as it was Mironov who scored his 5th of the season for Calgary. This was at the 6:21 minute mark to make it a 1-1 game, and there was definitely a lot calmer in terms of physical stuff for the rest of the game, as the game did start off physical, but it settled down after the first period. So we had a 1-1 game going into the third period. As if you're looking at the shots on net, it was definitely a slight edge to Regina, I would say, in the first two periods, but the Calgary Hitmen definitely came out strong in the third period, but Regina was also up to the task. So going into the third period, Regina took the lead again, as it was Armstrong who got his fourth of the season at 5:07 of the third period to make it 2-1 for Regina at that point. But then Calgary did tie it up a couple minutes later, as it was Riley Schultz who got his 24th of the season. This was at the 7:13 minute mark to make it a 2-2 game. However, Regina took again a lead later in the third period, as a Carrier who got his 15th of the season. This was at the 10:26 minute mark. So Regina, just past the midway point of the third period, was up 3-2. However, a couple minutes later again, there was Riley Schultz who got his second of the game, 25th of the season at 12:01 to make it a 3-3 game. So it was 3-3 going down in the stretch. And ultimately, as I like to say, this one needed overtime. Going in overtime, both teams had lots of chances on net. But ultimately, it was the Calgary Hitmen that came on the right end of this one, as it was Blake Stevenson who got the overtime winner, his 19th of the season at 2:05 in overtime. So the Calgary Hitmen now have won 2 straight, as they defeated the Regina Pats 4-3 in overtime. So leading the way for the Calgary Hitmen obviously was Riley Schultz, who had the 2 goals and 1 assist for 3 points. Sean Shigell was the only one with the multi-point game, who had 2 assists. So when it comes to the Regina Pats, actually Connor Bedard actually was the one who led the way in points. He had 2 assists in this game, as he was the only multi-point getter for the Regina Pats. As I mentioned, the shots on net was 34-31 in favor of Calgary, including both teams getting 3 in overtime. So when it comes to the goaltending story of this game, it was Braden Peters who was in net for Calgary. He made 28 saves for the win. Well, when it comes to the Regina Pats, it was Shelton Payne who was in net. He made 30 saves for the Pats. So that was game number 50, as the Calgary Hitmen now have won 2 in a row with that 4-3 win in overtime. So the next game for Calgary, this happened on Friday, March the 4th, for game 51, as the Calgary Hitmen had another stiff test as they were taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings, who the last couple seasons definitely has proven to be a bad matchup for the Calgary Hitmen. This game was on the road at Rogers Place, 7 p.m. puck drop, and did the trend continue on being the Oil Kings having their way with the Calgary Hitmen? Well, fortunately, I'm going to say that is the case, as the Edmonton Oil Kings did start off strong in this one, and they did start off with the first 2 goals of the game. As first, it was Dylan Gunther who got his 34th goal of the season for the Oil Kings. It wasn't until the 15-17 minute mark of the first period. So Edmonton takes a 1-0 lead, and then Gooley who got his 7th of the season at 17:26. So Edmonton has a 2-0 lead, and that was all the scoring to go in the first period, as the Edmonton Oil Kings had a 2-0 lead. Calgary also took a couple, Calgary and Edmonton also got early penalties, as though Zach Funk got one 10 seconds in, and Justin Sourdiff got a penalty for high sticking at mid-12 in. But that was actually all the penalties in the first period. But the Oil Kings definitely were flexing their muscle once again with a 2-0 lead going into the second period. However, going into the second period, the Calgary Hitmen did actually press back, despite still being outplayed by the Edmonton Oil Kings. Blake Stevenson got Calgary on the board, his 20th of the season, 56 seconds into the second period, to make it a 2-1 game for Edmonton at that point. And actually, Calgary was able to tie up the game at 2 apiece. There's Oliver Tulk, who got his 9th of the season at 6:59 of the second period. However, that was as close as the Calgary Hitmen were to get to the Edmonton Oil Kings for this game, as the Edmonton Oil Kings did score 2 more themselves in the second period to regain the 2-goal lead. First, it was Donahue who got his 7th of the season at 10-13. And then it was Van Olm who got his 7th of the season at 16-01. So Edmonton had a 4-2 lead at that point. And ultimately, they had a 4-2 lead going into the third period. However, there was more physical stuff in the second period. It was late in the second period that Zach Funt and Carter Kodak who got minors for roughing and holding. So it was a little bit of a battle of Alberta, but the third period definitely will put that in there, especially when this game ultimately got out of hand. So going into the third period, Edmonton up 4-2. They ultimately were able to put this away in a mid-span in the third period, as it was Miller who got his 6th goal of the season at 5:02 to make it 5-2 for Edmonton at that point, and then Dimmick who got his 17th goal of the season at 6:41 of the third period to make it 6-2 for the Edmonton Oil Kings. So ultimately, we weren't going to take this version of the Battle of Alberta. And then Sykes, who got a goal, his 6th of the season, with 5 seconds left to make it 7-2. So ultimately, the Edmonton Oil Kings, they destroyed the Calgary Hitmen 7-2. So we're definitely always been on the wrong end of this one with the Edmonton Oil Kings. The Calgary Hitmen definitely didn't press back at all in the third period. They were outshot 21-2 in the third period alone. However, there was definitely a few fights, as it was Matthew Sutter and Shea Van Olm who got a fighting penalty at 12:40. And I was going to say, no relation to the Sutter family from Matthew Sutter, but that was the big thing you could say for the Calgary Hitmen, is that Matthew Sutter fought in this one. So, as mentioned, the Calgary Hitmen lost this one 7-2, so their 2-game winning streak was a very, very quick one. I mean, there was no one who had a multi-point game for the Calgary Hitmen, but the Edmonton Oil Kings, so it was Logan Donachuk who got 1 goal and 1 assist for 2 points. And then there's Carter Corders and Carter South who got 2 assists each. So it definitely was a balanced attack for the Edmonton Oil Kings. Keep in mind they have draft picks in Caden Gooley, Dylan Gunther on this team. So those are the 2 players that come to mind right away that were draft picks recently for the National Hockey League. So that's another reason why the Edmonton Oil Kings have been a more talented team. So when it comes to the goaltending story of this game, actually Braden Peters was in net for the whole game, as he made 44 saves on 51 shots. Well, it was not Sebastian Costa that was in net for the Edmonton Oil Kings. It was Colby Hay who was in net. He made 19 saves on 21 shots. So it wasn't pretty for the Calgary Hitmen for game number 51 against the Edmonton Oil Kings in Edmonton. So game 52, this happened on Saturday, March the 5th, as the Calgary Hitmen once again taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings. This time it was at home at the Scotiabank Saddle, 2 p.m. puck drop. And that was the Bret the Hitman Hart night for jerseys. So always special jerseys for one of the founders of the Calgary Hitmen is the wrestler himself. So did that change the fortunes for the Calgary Hitmen in this one? I'm going to say, unfortunately, no, it wasn't. It was kind of more of the same, except it was definitely uglier at the end of this game. But the Edmonton Oil Kings, once again, they flexed their muscle in the Battle of Alberta. This one, it was Dylan Gunther who scored his 35th of the season early in this one at 1:10 to make it 1-0 for Edmonton. And then Justin Sourdish who got his 16th of the season for Edmonton at 8:30. So Calgary was down 2-0 to the Edmonton Oil Kings, and that's how things stood after the first period. It was 2-0 for Edmonton at that point. But things got more interesting later in the game. So going into the second period, as I say, the Calgary Hitmen down 2-0. Well, the Edmonton Oil Kings definitely continued their onslaught, as this definitely is a mismatch for the Calgary Hitmen. As Jalen Lupin, who got his 22nd goal of the season for the Edmonton Oil Kings. This was at the 11-19 minute mark of the second period to make it 3-0, and that was the only goal to report in the second period. So Edmonton was up to the 3-0 after the second period. There were definitely some fights to Highlight, there was Dylan Gunther for Edmonton and Trey Patterson for Calgary at 12-12. In the second period had some fights, but there definitely was some more penalties that we'll share later in the period as this game once again got out of hand. As going into the third period, Edmonton up 3-0. They definitely kept adding to their lead. Dylan Gunther got his 36th of the season shorthanded for Edmonton at 2:37 to make it 4-0. And then Justin Williams got a power play goal, his 29th of the season for Edmonton at 5:30 to make it 5-0 for Edmonton. And then Williams scored again his second of the game at 15:13 to make it 6-0 for his 30th goal of the season. The only positive you could say for the Calgary Hitmen is at least they did not get shut out in this one, as Carter Yemiuk got his third of the season on the power play at 17:10 of the third period. And that was as close as the Calgary Hitmen got to the Edmonton Oil Kings, or, if the Calgary Stampeders were able to get a couple more field goals or got that late touchdown, they would have beaten the Edmonton Elks. Except that's more of a blowout when it's 6-1 in hockey as opposed in football. So ultimately, the Edmonton Oil Kings, they got the better end of the Calgary Hitmen in this weekend set by winning 6-1, and then they scored 7-2 the night before. So they scored Calgary 13-3 in this set with the Edmonton Oil Kings. Let's also highlight there's some more fighting as this game got out of hand, as Jacob Demesk for the Edmonton Oil Kings fought with Ryder Fitter-Schultz of the Calgary Hitmen. He actually also got a game misconduct on that one. And then Carter Kovalchuk for Edmonton got a 10-minute misconduct, and Justin Saladith got a 2-minute minor for roughing and a 10-minute misconduct, as he also was roughing with Matthew Sutter and Brandon Winehouse. So at least you might have had some extra entertainment if you're willing to stay till the end for the Battle of Alberta part when it comes to the Western Hockey League. And once again, just like the game before, the Calgary Hitmen were terribly outshot by the Edmonton Oil Kings. Not by as much this time, but it was 44-24 for shots for the Edmonton Oil Kings. So when it comes to who led the way for the Calgary Hitmen, well, no one had a multi-point game for the Calgary Hitmen with only one goal. And then it was Ethan Bonaventura. He was in net. This time he was in for the whole game, as he made 38 saves on 44 shots. So the Edmonton Oil Kings, well, Dylan Gunther definitely led the way. He had 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points. Josh Williams had 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points. And then Jalen Lupin, Justin Saladith each had a goal and assist. So those who led the way for the Edmonton Oil Kings. And then it was Sebastian Costa who was in net for the Edmonton Oil Kings for this one. Yeah, he was the Detroit Red Wings draft pick this past draft. He made 23 saves on 24 shots. So definitely, we're not looking good for the Calgary Hitmen, as the Edmonton Oil Kings have our numbers. So that was game 52. So game 53, this happened on Tuesday, March 8th, as the Calgary Hitmen now head on the road, as they were taking on the Winnipeg Ice. This was at the Wayne Fleming Arena, 6 p.m. puck drop, and yes, it's named after the same Wayne Fleming that was the assistant coach for the Calgary Flames at one time, and God bless his soul as he has passed on. But this is not going to get any easier for the Calgary Hitmen, as they have to make the trek all the way to Manitoba, and the fact that the Edmonton Oil Kings are also up there in the league with the Winnipeg Ice. So how did things go for the Calgary Hitmen in this one? Well, the Calgary Hitmen were once again playing from behind fairly early, as it was a tentative game for the first period. However, the Ice were able to get the first goal of the game. As a result, he got his 5th of the season at 4:33 to make it 1-0, and that was the only goal in the first period, as the Ice took a 1-0 lead at that point. However, at the second period, the Calgary Hitmen definitely were outplayed by the Winnipeg Ice, as they were outshot 23-4 in the second period alone. However, the Winnipeg Ice actually only got 1 goal out of that period. It was Brown who got his 5th of the season at 4:12 of the second period. So the Winnipeg Ice took a 2-0 lead at that point, and that's how things stood going into the third period. And then going into the third period, I think the second period was a lot like the first period. It was very, very tentative, very defensively clamped down. However, there was no score in the report. So ultimately, the Winnipeg Ice actually defeated the Calgary Hitmen 2-0 in this game. So Calgary, after finally getting off that 8-game losing streak, are now on a 3-game losing streak, but they've lost to the top two teams in the Western Conference. When it comes to the shots in net, well, the Winnipeg Ice, they outshot the Calgary Hitmen 37-14. So the Calgary Hitmen definitely were snuffed out in this game, had no pushback. So obviously, no one leads the way for the Calgary Hitmen. No one scored, but it was Braden Peters who was in net for Calgary. Made 35 saves in 27 shots, thinking it could have been worse, considering Calgary was outshot 23-4 in the second period. And then when it comes to Winnipeg Ice, well, Ben Rizzotti and Tanner Brown were the two goal scorers. Excuse me. And then it was Daniel Hauser who had a fairly easy night for the shutout. Made 14 saves. So that's all I could say for this game, Game 51, as the Calgary Hitmen were taking on the Winnipeg Ice. So Game 54, the last game, we'll recap in this episode before we move on to other business, as it was on Wednesday, March 9th, as the Calgary Hitmen were hosting not hosting, they were in Brandon, as they were taking on the Brandon Oil Kings. This was the Westobia Place, 6 p.m. puck drop. So how did things go in Brandon, as the Calgary Hitmen were still in Manitoba? Well, actually, the Calgary Hitmen, once again, seems to be the theme with this one, as they start off behind early, although not super early, but the Brandon Oil Kings did score the first goal of the game, as it was Romar Sa, who got his 14th goal of the season for the Oil Kings. This was at 8:43 to make it 1-0 for Brandon, and that was the only goal of the first period. So Brandon took a 1-0 lead at that point of the game. But going into the second period, the Calgary Hitmen were able to tie it up to make it a 1-1 game, as it was Riley Fisher's results, who got his 26th goal of the season. This was at the 11:43 minute mark, so we had a 1-1 game at that point. And that was the only goal in the second period, so we had a 1-1 game going into the third period, as both teams, I'm going to say, were played evenly in the first two periods, but the Brandon Oil Kings, I'm going to say, pressed back in the third period. However, the Calgary Hitmen were able to stay afloat. So, as I like to say, with no scoring, with a 1-1 game going in the third period, this one needed overtime because there was no scoring in the third period. In overtime, it was ultimately one shot was needed, and it was Richie who scored the overtime winner for the Brandon Oil Kings, his 26th goal of the season at the 1:11 minute mark. So ultimately, the Brandon Oil Kings, they won this one 2-1. So at least the Calgary Hitmen were able to get a point. However, they're in a rush stretch right now, where I think they're not likely going to make the playoffs. And when we take a look ahead to that part, the Calgary Hitmen are still going to be on a nice long road trip, especially making up a couple games that they missed in Brandon in January. But as I mentioned, the Brandon Oil Kings had the edge in play in this one, as they outshot the Calgary Hitmen 39-33 overall, including 1-0 in overtime. So looking at the box stats, well, Ryder Fisher-Schultz obviously was the only one that scored for Calgary. And then there was, looking at the Brandon Oil Kings, well, Vincent Iorio led the way with 2 assists, but there was Nolan Ritchie and Riley Rosava who got the goals for the Brandon Oil Kings. So we'll go through the story of the game. Was Anthony Bonaventura who was in net. He made 37 saves on 39 shots. Well, for the Brandon Oil Kings, it was Carter Bjornsson who had 32 saves on 33 shots. So that's it for the Calgary Hitmen for this segment, for the terms of looking at the last 6 games. So the Calgary Hitmen, after 54 games, they have 20 wins, 26 losses, 6 overtime losses, and 2 shootout losses, which gives them 48 points overall, which puts them 4th in the Central Division. And right now they're outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs. So if we take a look at the quick stats before we move on to the standings, Riley Fisher-Schultz still leads the way in scoring for the Calgary Hitmen. In 52 games, he has 59 points, 26 goals, 33 assists. Sean Shigell, in 54 games, he has 49 points, 20 goals, 29 assists. Third in scoring is Blake Stevenson. He's played 58 games. He has 20 goals, 27 assists for 47 points. Zach Funk is fourth in scoring. In 51 games, he has 17 goals, 13 assists for 30 points. And they're on at top five. Actually, it's a tie for top five. Cale Zimmerman, in 52 games, he has 10 goals, 12 assists for 22 points. And then Gordon Shipman, who had 54 games, he has 8 goals, 14 assists for 22 points. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it is Brady Peters. In 38 games, he has a 17, 18, and 2 record with goals against average of .295 and no shutouts. And then when it comes to, I don't think he has a shutout this year. And then on the goaltending for Ethan Bonachura, in 18 games, he has 3 wins, 8 losses, 4 overtime losses, and a .360 goals against average. So that's the quick stats for the Calgary Hitmen. So now if we take a look at the standings, as there's some teams that have already clinched themselves a playoff spot for the 2022 WHL playoffs. So if we start out west in the U.S. division, well, Everett has clinched their playoff spot. They have 80 points in 53 games. Portland's in the playoffs. The Portland Winterhawks, they have 79 points in 56 games. Seattle Thunderbirds, they're in the playoffs. They have 73 points in 53 games. Keep in mind, 68 is the games played for the Western Hockey League. Then the Spokane Chiefs, they're fourth. They have 41 points, 54 points. Around the U.S. division is the Tri-City Americans. They have 35 points in 53 games. So now if we go to the BC division, well, Kamloops is in the playoffs, the Plains Bladers. They have 80 points in 55 games. And then the Kelowna Rockets, they're also in the playoffs. They have 72 points in 52 games, so both the big interior cities will be in the playoffs. And then Vancouver, they have 43 points in 52 games for third. Fourth is the Prince George Cougars. They have 41 points in 53 games. Then the Victoria Royals are last. They have 38 points in 55 games. So that is the Western Conference. So going out to the East and the Central Division, well, the Edmonton Oil Kings, they're in the playoffs. They have 87 points, 56 games. And then the Red Deer Rebels, they have 75 points in 55 games. Third place is the Lethbridge Hurricanes. They have 50 points in 53 games. Then Calgary is now fourth in the Central Division, as mentioned. They have 48 points in 54 games. Swift Current, they have 47 points in 55 games. And then sixth place, last place in the Central is the Medicine Hat Tigers. They had 24 points in 53 games. So that is the Central Division. Now the East Division, well, the Winnipeg Ice, they have clinched themselves a playoff spot as they're first in the East with 79 points in 51 games. Moose Jaw is second. They have 67 points in 55 games. Third place is the Saskatoon Blades. They have 66 points in 53 games. Brandon's fourth place with 61 points in 51 games. Prince Albert's fifth with 47 points in 53 games. And then Regina Pats, they are last with 44 points in 57 or 51 games. So that is how the playoff picture looks. So you already got 5 teams who clinched the playoff spot in the Western Conference. Well, in the East, you only have 2 teams that have clinched the playoff spot, which are the divisional winners. But I'm going to say right now, if you look from the Eastern Conference, I'm going to say Red Deer, Moose Jaw, and Saskatoon should easily make the playoffs, as well as the Brandon Wheat Kings. So there's only 2 spots left, but the way the Calgary Hitmen are shaping up, they're either going to just miss the playoffs or they're going to get rewarded by playing Winnipeg or Edmonton in the first round. So maybe in the next episode we'll take a look at more potential series when it comes to the WHL playoffs. So now looking ahead here for the next 6 games, and actually the next episode will be my last 6-game episode of the season, because as I mentioned with 68 games, after the next episode, then the 2 last episodes of the regular season, which will be episodes 12 and 13. This will be episode 11 for the next 6 games. Will be 4-game segments. As I mentioned, looking ahead, it's not going to get that much easier for the Calgary Hitmen, considering how much time they're going to spend on the road. So game 55, this will be on Friday, March the 11th, is the Calgary Hitmen will still be on the road, as they'll be taking on the Moose Jaw Warriors in Moose Jaw. That'll be a 6 p.m. puck drop at the Mosaic Place. The game 56, this will be on Saturday, March the 12th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be in Regina, as they'll be taking on the Regina Pats at the Branch Center, 6 p.m. puck drop. And then games 57-58, this is when the Calgary Hitmen play some catch-up. As game 57 on Tuesday, March the 15th, the Calgary Hitmen go back to Manitoba as they be taking on the Winnipeg Ice. This will be at the Wayne Fleming Arena, 7 p.m. puck drop. That game was rescheduled from Saturday, January the 8th, when there was COVID going wrong in the Western Hockey League. So that's when that game gets made up. And then game 58, this will be on Wednesday, March the 16th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be in Brandon to take on the Edmonton Oil Kings again. So looking at the strength of schedule, it's not going to get any easier for Calgary. This will be at the 7 p.m. puck drop at the Westobia Place, 7 p.m. puck drop. And as mentioned, that game was rescheduled from Friday, January 7th. So those two games have been made up there. They did make a couple other videos, and some games got rescheduled for the Calgary Hitmen, so you can see that. And then on game 59, Friday, March the 18th, after they're in Brandon, they get to go to Edmonton to take on the Edmonton Oil Kings once again. Yay! At Rogers Place, 7 p.m. puck drop. And then the Calgary Hitmen, they don't get to spend any time at home. As on Tuesday, March the 22nd, the Calgary Hitmen will be still on the road taking on the Lethbridge Hurricanes, 7 p.m. puck drop at NMAX Place. So the next episode, the Calgary Hitmen will be all on the road, still in Saskatchewan, back in Manitoba, and then they come back to Alberta to take on Edmonton and Lethbridge. So that's where I'm saying, looking at the schedule, how Calgary's played lately, I think we are unlikely to make the playoffs. And unless they pull off some miracles in the next episode, I'm just being realistic here. That's all I'm saying. With our junior hockey team, we definitely sold at the trade deadline, and it definitely showed. But that's a different beast when it comes to junior hockey. So anyways, like I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, home to Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my each hour, recap games and stories and that. And also, I do have a variety of non-sports content, like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and also do share my experiences, let's say I'm on the road or at a sporting event. And I have done some vlogging to go, so if that sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, you just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below for other ways you can follow me. Of course, I have my second channel in Bret Hart Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on there. So I appreciate it. Like, subscribe both here on my main channel as well as my second channel. So I'm still going to say, let's go Hitmen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode or next video, depending on how you consume my content. But I appreciate consuming it however way you've done it. So thank you.